Animal sacrifice was an all-pervasive reality in ancient Greece, but the rite was often questioned and was considered unnecessary or objectionable. The Pythagoreans and the Orphics demanded that the lives of all creatures with souls be spared. The pre-Socratic Empedocles was the most vehement in attacking what he called the cannibalistic madness of the traditional sacrificial meal. There are also rumors and intimations that originally, the ancient Greeks practiced an even more violent and bloodthirsty form of worship. In ancient Greece, sacrificial killing was the basic experience of the sacred. As the participants traveled to the temple in their best clothes, the sacrificial animal was led alongside them. Just like the participants, the animal was dressed for the occasion. Its brow was bound with ribbons and its horns were covered with gold. The goal was the altar, the sacrificial stone. Usually a fire was already burning. Incense and flute sounds filled the air. In Greece, custom dictated that a virgin lead the way, the kanephoros, basket carrier, a girl holding a covered basket. After arriving at the sacred place, the participants marked off a circle. The sacrificial basket and water jug were carried around the assembly. Hands were washed, and the animal's head was doused with water from the jug. The shaking of the animal's head was taken to signify a willing nod, a yes to the sacrificial act. Barley grains, the most ancient agricultural product, were taken from the basket. After a brief silence, the euphemein, the participants flung the barley grains away onto the sacrificial animal, the altar, and the earth. Hidden beneath the grains in the basket was the knife, which was now uncovered. The hieros, or priest, stepped towards the sacrificial animal, carrying the knife so that the animal couldn't see it. He cut a few hairs from the brow and threw the hairs into the fire. Now was the moment for the death blow. The women raised a piercing scream. As the blood ran out, it was not allowed to spill onto the ground. It needed to hit the altar, the hearth, or the sacrificial pit. The animal was carved up and disemboweled. First of all, the heart, sometimes still beating, was put on the altar and was quickly roasted in the fire and then eaten. The bones were consecrated separately from the meal. The thigh bones and the pelvis were put on the altar and burned. The skulls of bulls and rams and goat horns were preserved permanently in the temple as evidence of the completed act. The skin of the sacrificial victim was sold to benefit the finances of the sanctuary. At a sacrifice, the circle of participants was brought together in a communal meal, killing to sustenance. A sacrifice was simultaneously a murder, a gift, and a communal meal. There are echoes of all of these elements, the elements of Greek sacrificial ritual, and certain ancient stories which center on the ritual murder of humans. The sacrifice of Iphigeneia by her father Agamemnon on the eve of the Trojan War is only the most famous example. Iphigeneia was the daughter of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra of Mycenae. According to the story, Agamemnon had displeased the goddess Artemis by some undisclosed offense. Usually it was by hunting and killing one of Artemis's sacred stags. The goddess retaliated by preventing the Greek troops mustered at Aulis from reaching Troy. The only way Agamemnon could get his ships moving was by killing his eldest daughter, Iphigeneia, as a human sacrifice. Aeschylus's Agamemnon is our most famous source for this myth. During her sacrifice, Iphigeneia wears and then discards a specific piece of clothing, a saffron-colored robe called a krokotos. The mention of this krokotos immediately identifies Iphigeneia as a central figure, not just in myth, but in an Athenian ritual called the Brauronia. In a famous passage of Aristophanes' Lysistrata, a young female chorus member lists her civic accomplishments.
At 7 years old I was a basket carrier. Next, when I was 10, I was a flour grinder for the goddess. And then, while wearing the saffron-colored robe, I was a bear at the Brauronian festival.
Every 4 years, the Athenian demos would celebrate the Brauronia. The festival marked the achievement of a group of young Athenian maidens called arktoi, or bears. It was a graduation of a younger generation of Athenian women to social maturity. The festival involved choral dancing, torchlit races, and a procession of family members and attendees from central Athens to the outlying sanctuary on the eastern coast of Attica. The cult itself goes back at least to the geometric period. The two main buildings of the sanctuary to Artemis at Brauron were probably a 5th century Doric temple and a large banquet building called the Stoa of the Arktoi, or Stoa of the Bears. To the south of the stoa was a small two-room structure which historically was identified as the Heroon or tomb of Iphigeneia. But why was a seemingly wholesome initiation rite, a coming-of-age ceremony, associated with human sacrifice? It turns out that in some versions of the myth, Iphigeneia wasn't actually sacrificed. Instead, she was rescued at the very moment of her murder. The goddess Artemis saves her, and her place in the sacrificial ritual is taken by a replacement or representative animal, usually a deer. This type of ritual has been called a metonymic or representative sacrifice. A community performs a rite, or in extreme circumstances sacrifices an individual for the good of the community at large. This individual is a substitute for either the real cause of the problem, which is often unknown or unknowable, or more literally, it can be an animal as a substitute for a human. A number of late lexicographical sources present accounts of the history of the Brauronia in exactly these terms. In one source, Apollo ordered the Athenians to found a festival to Artemis to remove a plague which was caused by the killing of a bear. A man named Embaros declared that he would sacrifice his daughter to Artemis under the condition that his descendants be granted the priesthood of the goddess. He then smartly hid the girl in the secret room of a temple and sacrificed a goat in human clothing instead. In both the stories surrounding the Brauronia and Iphigeneia's sacrifice at Aulis, a sacrificial animal takes the place of a human. Embaros replaces his daughter with a goat, and Iphigeneia is variously replaced in our sources by a deer, a bear, or a phantom. This substitution of animal for human implies that at Brauron, the archeteia involved representative individuals at many levels. The sacrificial act, which is so central to the act of Agamemnon, the gift of a precious object to a goddess, was the precursor and archetype for the ritual of the Brauronia. Each young bear was a representative of her age cohort, and also, through her participation in the rite itself, a substitute for the original victim, Iphigeneia. The Greeks did not perceive much difference between their own customs and those of the Egyptians, the Phoenicians, the Babylonians, the Etruscans, or the Romans. Just like in many cultures, human sacrifice was certainly part of the mythology and the cultural memory of ancient Greece. It was the idea of substitution or representation, itself inherent in sacrificial ritual generally, which allowed an evolutionary movement away from the killing of humans. So there's much more to say on that topic as always, but we're going to leave it here once again. Thank you very much for watching. If you found this video helpful or entertaining, or hopefully both, please do subscribe and like the video. It helped me out very much. If you're interested in non-normative Greek religious practice, take a look at this video right here on the Orphic Mysteries. Thank you guys.